Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with part 5, the tradition and the evolution of the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry, from the Story of Freemasonry by W.G. Sibley. The tradition and evolution of the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry. Freemasonry is a beautiful system of ethics which cultivates certain great fundamental, moral, and religious truths, and impresses them upon the minds of its votaries by elaborate symbolical ceremonies which point to the Bible as the great light by which mankind should be morally and spiritually guided. The origin, purposes, and history of this most ancient, famous, enduring, and cosmopolitan of all the world's secret organization has been investigated, discussed, and speculated upon by Masonic and other scholars until the printed records of their researches, arguments, and conclusions from a literature that could find room only within the limits of a large library and would require a lifetime of study by a perfectly equipped intellect to weed out all error, reconcile every difference of opinion, and mold the great mass of fact into one consistent and universally accepted whole. If Masonic tradition be not accepted, the explorer who seeks the beginning of the order at once confronts a sphinx, the answer to whose enigma has been lost in the impenetrable clouds of the Dark Ages, or remains hidden in the deeply covered and forgotten vaults of remote antiquity. The first crude written constitutions and regulations of the fraternity, now in the possession of historians, were made either in the 13th or 14th century after Christ. The writers who have given Masonry consideration in standard English books often reference and have based their conclusions on visible evidence only, are almost unanimous in fixing its origin in one or the other of the periods mentioned. On the other hand, there are learned authors who have studied and reasoned exhaustively as Freemasons, who believe that the society existed as an absolute secret one, 2,000 years before any manuscript or inscriptions concerning its source and doctrines were permitted to be made. They hold that the internal evidence found in the esoteric teachings of the order proves that it was created by Solomon, king of Israel, Hiram, king of Tyre, Hiram-Abith, a widow's son of the tribe of Naphtali, at the time of the building of Solomon's temple at Jerusalem, 1,000 years before Christ. These writers, without an exception, believed that through the instrumentality of Masonry, the 5 books of Moses were preserved after the destruction of the temple by Nebuchadnezzar, during a period of general lawlessness and disorder lasting nearly 5 centuries, and then discovered and brought to light. With all due respect for the strict requirements of accuracy in historical research, it seems quite as reasonable that Masonry should be transmitted through organized bodies of intelligent and reverent men from the time of Solomon, as that the voluminous poems of Homer should be preserved during hundreds of years, in all their purity and exquisite beauty, by bands of minstrels. The discovery of Masonic emblems in the foundation steps to the pedestal of the Egyptian obelisk at Alexandria, known as Cleopatra's Needle, is accepted by many as strong evidence that Freemasonry existed at least a century before Christ. This great shaft is now in Central Park, New York City, where it was erected in 1880 after transportation in the hold of the vessel especially constructed for the purpose. The stones and implements showing the Masonic signs and emblems were placed in the same position in which they were found in Egypt when the obelisk was erected in America. But it is not the purpose here either to indulge in speculation upon uncertainties or to attempt by conjecture to arrive at the time-hidden facts of ancient errors. These pages are intended to convey only such information of the history, structure, and character of Masonry, and of the notable assaults and criticisms that have been made upon it, as is fully authenticated and necessary for those who desire to be well informed on the subject. Keep it in mind all the while, with some appreciation of its truth, the statement of Chevalier de Bonneville, that The span of 10 men's lives is too short a period for the execution of so formidable an undertaking as the production of a universal history of the Masonic craft. The original historical Masonry, as distinguished from the traditional, had but one degree, as the word is used technically by the craft, and it was conferred only on Operative Masons, who made use of it as a means of recognition among themselves, to keep impostors from their counsels, and to preserve the organization necessary for the prosperity of their profession of practical architecture. During the medieval period of cathedral building in Europe, when magnificent edifices were erected in Vienna, Reims, Pisa, York, Paris, London, Strasbourg, Cologne, and other cities by the Masons, they worked under their own government in lodges strictly ruled, traveling from place to place as work required. In 1702, a London lodge adopted a regulation extending its privileges to men of different professions, providing they were regularly approved, accepted, and initiated. This example was followed by other lodges and opened the door to Masonry to men unskilled in architecture, but enormously increased the scope and influence of the society, which from the time developed rapidly into the present wholly speculative and cosmopolitan system of ethics, in which the Hindu, the Parsi, the Jew, the Mohammedan, the Trinitarian, and the Unitarian may conscientiously participate. The 3-degree ceremonials seem to have come into existence about 1735. 10 years later, they have been revised by Martin Clare, and in 1777, Preston's beautiful ritualistic suggestions were accepted and adopted by the order. The requirement of a practical knowledge of the science of architecture having been abandoned during this era of evolution. A thorough understanding of the lofty moral principles inculcated by the symbolism of the degrees was exacted of the masters of the craft. Operative skill yielded and finally almost wholly disappeared in the society under the stimulus of the far greater importance of the nobler virtues, the more widely needed lessons, and the infinitely higher moral worth of purely speculative Masonry. Men of prominence in church and state, who were never actually employed in building, but whose high character and fine attainments had made them distinguished, were accepted as Masons, free from the former prerequisite of operative proficiency, and so became known as free and accepted Masons, whence came Freemasonry as an evolution of Masonry. Within 40 years, the organization, in its improved and enlarged form, spread into Ireland, Scotland, France, Holland, Russia, Spain, Italy, Germany, and America, attracting to its rights in all these countries men of profound intelligence by whom its noble principles were deeply cherished. The 3 degrees of symbolic Masonry, both traditional and historical, are called Entered Apprentice, Fellow Craft, and Master Mason. 7 or more Master Masons acting under lawful authority constitute a perfect lodge, the name properly given both to the organization and to the place where members meet to practice their rites. The principal officers of the lodge are the Worshipful Master, Senior Warden, and Junior Warden. The Master representing Solomon, King of Israel, the Senior Warden personating Hiram, King of Tyre. A meeting of a lodge is called a communication, and every candidate for its degrees must be accepted to all its members, an inviolable law under which no complaint over the admission of new members can ever arise in a Masonic lodge. The Grand Lodge of England in 1717, when the ballot box was unknown, required members to decide on the admission of the candidate in their own prudent way, either virtually or in form, but with unanimity. With this requirement goes another law, unique among secret organizations, which is that no Mason shall ever solicit any person to become a member of the order. This makes every application absolutely voluntary, and its enforcement, no doubt, has caused many worthy men to wonder why they have never been invited to become Masons. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.